Hello everyone, Santir here, and welcome to my life and channel update for November 2023, and wow, this has been a long month for me. So I was actually doing something smart, which I should probably make a regular habit at the start of these, and I went and reviewed the titles for my Dear Patreons, my Dear Patrons posts. For those who don't know, I have a Patreon where I write a daily journal entry, basically, just what's been going on that day, what sort of things I've been thinking about, what projects are in the works. How's my sleep been? That's a little joke for those who are subscribed to that. But I write those up in Notepad, and then I save them, so I have a folder full of all of these, and there's the title of like a summary of the day. So I reviewed those so I could actually get a sense of what happened this month. And it has been a very long month. With a lot of things that have happened. So I'll just talk about some of those. Probably the big one that people have noticed for this channel in particular is that I've started streaming again, specifically streaming Guild Wars 1. Around, I don't know, for the Black Friday sales, basically, ArenaNet decided to put a bunch of Guild Wars stuff on sale on Steam, notably for the Steam Black Friday, Cyber Monday timed sales. And that included Guild Wars 1, which is 75% off. And I decided, you know what? I think I'm going to finally get a second account. I want to experience the process of unlocking all skills again. I always think of UAX in my head, unlocked everything, basically, unlocked all X, all things, because that includes like unlocking heroes and weapon mods and all of that, which my main account is unlocked everything and has been since Eye of the North, sometime after Eye of the North came out, when I would have finished unlocking heroes and skills and stuff. But my main focus is on unlocking all skills because, you know, that affects like what skill trainers sell, but most importantly, what heroes can use. So the process of unlocking all skills sounded interesting to me and something that I wanted to share as well. So that's something that I'm going to be streaming off and on. No particular schedule. If you want to know when I start streaming it on Twitch, you can join my Discord server. There's usually a link down in the description for that. And so you can join my Discord server, and I have a notification channel there. So I'll notify people when I have gone live there. Or you can follow me on Twitch or whatever, however you want to get your notifications. Just twitch.tv/Santir. It's what you would expect, I suppose. It's SIENTIR. And anyway, I'm not like I have no sort of schedule though, but the VODs will be going up here within probably a few days, just depending upon how quickly I get to them and thumbnail things up and everything. So you can always just watch the VODs here if you like, and that is excellent as well. So that's kind of the big thing for this channel in terms of stuff that's been going on. And it feels good to stream again. It was so nice to have people show up and to chat with them and everything. So that's been good. I do want to figure out why I've sometimes had the stream drop, though, which is why things have been coming to you in multiple parts. Because for some reason, the stream has been dropping out briefly. Like, I don't think it's been for very long. I think it's just been a few seconds. But it's been dropping out. So that's been annoying and something I want to fix. But other things that have been going on this month, I published 3 articles on my blog, which is probably, if I had to guess, the most articles I've published in a month. Although one of those, so just to kind of give a quick rundown, a quick summary of them. The first one is my view of the Bible, and that came out on the 1st, so very long time ago. This was just part of a response to sort of an email conversation I've been having with my pastor, and it made me want to like think through this and how do I actually view the Bible. And the core concept there that kind of connects to all of this is this idea of how I view guidelines and laws and rules and stuff, where I have this idea of there's a core seed of love that from that grows or extends out. my comparison was a ray, because I think mathematically in this sense, where there's a ray that comes out, and you have, deriving from love, you have various principles, and from those you derive guidelines that then people will derive more specific laws from. And that these should all find a way to root back to love, but also that love is the core operating principle, and anything that is closer to love is more significant. So if there's a perceived conflict between something that's closer to love and something that's further, I will go with the thing that's closer to love. And then also the concept of people like their laws, they like their rules, they like to have a definite morality. On that note, if you want an interesting game that kind of examines some of this stuff, I watched PlayFrame's Let's Play of, I think it's the Forgotten City. I'll try to remember to include a link to their playlist in the description. But that's a game that's kind of examining the concept of this sort of thing. But people like to have their laws, and I see that as like perpendicular to this ray, where a little bit off from it, and you're not getting that far from love, right? It's a perpendicular line to a ray is going to eventually go away from it. But the more particular you get with the laws, like you can basically take laws or tradition and really run with it and move further and further away from love, because you're operating perpendicular to the ray. Anyway, that's kind of the core concept of that article. And then one of the other big concepts that hit me this month is this idea of a moral paradigm shift, which is extremely hard to explain, because the way that people interact with morality tends to be thinking of it in a law-based sort of way, of like right and wrong, do this, don't do that sort of thing. And taking a different paradigm of morality that then gives freedom from the obligation or the duty of, because like I'm expanding this idea of morality, right? I'm not just like right and wrong in the classic sense that we tend to think of it, but in the actual way in which we tend to interact with it, of like, this is how you behave socially, right? This is what makes somebody acceptable in society, and this is what makes somebody unacceptable. There's this whole more expanded concept that I'm looking at, and this creates a lot of pressure, a lot of weight on people, and it's something that I certainly feel for my own self. And so the idea of shifting to a different paradigm for how we're operating is kind of the core of this second article that I wrote as well, that was based on the like this concept finally clicking in my brain. And it is a Christian concept, but I don't think it's one that's well understood, because it is fundamentally very strange. So I'm not going to try to explain it any more than I already have here, because it's just very, very, very hard to do. And I do try to explain it some, like if I were to go into it, it'd be a separate video. But I do go into the ideas in The Tragedy of Virtue. That's what I named this article. So there's going to be links to these articles in the description as well. And so you can go and read that as I'm trying to mull over. A lot of that article is looking at the way that virtue, these things that are supposed to help people be good, end up making people arrogant and miserable instead. And I think it was a rather interesting examination. And then the third article, which I just published, this one's been in the works for a while now, and is just a very difficult one to write, because there's a lot of deep introspection going on anyway. I called it Wrestling with Manhood, and it's an examination of my understanding and relationship with gender and sexuality, and a lot of the challenges with that, with like, what are the models, what does it mean to be a man, and how do I interact with my sexuality and things like that. So it's a very personal, very vulnerable article, very difficult one to write, especially in some parts. It's, I mean, intrinsically, deeply from my point of view, my perspective. So I'd be very curious to hear how other people's relationships with these things are, in terms of like, where are they similar, where are they different, right? Comparison contrast type stuff would be of interest to me, just to know what are other people's experiences. But that one is definitely a pretty long article. But you can find a link to that in the description as well. And it feels very good to get that one done this month in particular, because it was a weird article in that it was much harder to write than it was to edit. It didn't require a whole lot of polishing, although there are some really niggly bits in there as I was writing it. I was trying to figure out like how to end it and connect everything together and wrap it up. But I'm feeling the weird I have just published this article emotions about it. I'm happy with where it came to, but now it's like oh goodness, I put this out in the universe sort of thing. So other things this month. Let's see. I finished my most recent read through of the Bible. It took about 2 years. So that's kind of exciting. I've been taking a pause from that before I start reading the Bible again, because I just like to do a slow read through, a few pages each day, but to use that time to read some other books that I've been wanting to get to. So I've, in particular, some number of years ago, got a book called Coming Out Like a Porn Star, because I was very curious what it had to say about these sort of lived experiences of people who are in sex work who then have, like, how are they interacting with people learning about that? Because that's community I care about, and having those first person narratives on that does a lot to not only humanize but also demonstrate the diversity of experiences. And so I've been reading that, and that's been something that I have appreciated, I think is the right word there, as I've been going through that. So once I finish that and I have another book lined up that I kind of want to read through, I'll probably get back to another read through of the Bible. It'll probably take about another 2 years. And let's see, The Secrets of the Obscure, next part of that came out. So I've been playing through Guild Wars 2 some, but I've also gotten myself back into Elden Ring. I've been watching, I don't know why, but I was in the mood for watching a first playthrough. So I ended up watching the VODs of Dan Jones' first playthrough, and that was interesting. Part of it is a friend of mine started playing Elden Ring, and he was messaging me about it. So that got me wanting to play it again, and now I'm really looking forward to the DLC again. So there's that. So I like Elden Ring a lot in most ways, but it has this problem of turning into a checklist of like getting all of the loot and doing all of the side quests and stuff, which is like not the way that, like, the game is better when it feels more ad hoc, and just that like first playthrough experience of just like stumbling across stuff and finding things is so much fundamentally better in terms of like the richness of the experience than the playthroughs where it's like, here's a checklist of the things that I want to get in finishing my build or whatever. But it's hard to stay in that. Like, it's hard to avoid that checklist spot for my brain. I tried mostly with this playthrough that I've been doing, but it's been challenged. I have also been making some decent progress on my RPG. I don't know what state it was in when last I talked a month ago. Part of it is my focus lately has been on getting these articles done, so that way they stop rambling about my brain. So I've been trying to put my focus on that. I have one more article that I want to write that's currently in my like get this done soon queue. I've got more ideas floating around, but that's the one that's kind of like in my get this one done soon queue that I want to finish and then like really focus on the game and streaming. I mean, that sounds like the greater emphasis will be on working on the game, with the streaming as something that crops up with some regularity, but no scheduledness. I don't like having too much schedule or routine. So I'm looking forward to really digging into the game more. I'm liking how things are shaping up with it. Particularly, there's a lot of systems. So one of the challenges I have. Okay, so there's so many different levels of things with the RPG. I'm ending up in a spot that's more like Pokemon. I keep bouncing around of like what's going to lead to the gameplay that I'm going to want to try to do. And I'm winding up in a spot that's more like Pokemon than I was thinking I was going to be, and I don't know, everything's kind of all over the place. But one of the things that Pokemon does that I've come to really appreciate is healing is not really a skill thing. Like, when you think of Pokemon moves, there are some healing moves. Rest comes to mind, Soft Boiled, Milk Drink, Recover especially. I don't know why that one took until 4th, but whatever. You got some random weird ones like Leech Seed. But for the most part, like, there's not field moves to heal you. Like, healing as you're playing through the RPG. I'm not talking competitive battling. That's its own separate animal, and I like it, but it's its own separate animal, and I'm not making a competitive battler. I'm just making an RPG that you play through with a story or whatever, what ends up happening. And the thing that Pokemon does is your healing is done predominantly with items. So I'm just thinking about like systems of what makes items relevant, because items naturally compete with skills for healing, and that has huge implications for your game's economy, because if you're using skills to heal, you're not spending money to heal, and there's all sorts of like, if you want items to matter, you have to make them matter, and there's different ways of trying to do that. But what I'm going to do here is no healing skills with a slight asterisk next to it. Because one of the other things is like skills are going to be attached to equipment that you slot, and like that can make for very fiddly gameplay where you're like, oh, I don't want this person to bring this healing skill generally, but I will slot it on so they can heal out of battle, and then if you make healing only happen in battle, it's just a whole mess, and I want to sidestep it. So anyway, I've been doing a lot of thinking about that sort of in the background and kind of figuring out how a lot of systems are going to work. And I like where they're at, but I'll talk about that in more detail as I actually like really sit down and focus on it more again, because I want to get these articles written first. So like I said, they stop bouncing around my brain. Of course, then the game's bouncing around my brain instead. My brain is a busy place. Excuse me. On the plus side, I've also been doing a lot of work to figure out how my creativity works. And one of the big breakthroughs that I had, I guess it must have been this month, was the idea of describing things before I try to implement them. I have this tendency to get stuck. Like, if I basically hit a spot where I get stuck, I have a hard time figuring out how to get unstuck. And it requires like enough time for my subconscious to kind of work through things. But what I have found is that writing a short description, like logically thinking through, okay, what are the things that I'm trying to do here, in just a short description form, then gives me the starting point to like work from. So to use an example where this was really helpful, with map making, because you need maps for your RPG, sitting down and saying, okay, what, like this map is functionally a bunch of hallways. What rooms are coming off of this map? I need space for them. And then using that to then be like, okay, now I can think about how, okay, I want these things, so here's how I want to organize them. But I needed to like come up with that initial like definitive list of things. And it's not a long description, it's a short little description, a couple sentences, but it was enough to kind of give me a starting point. And like, there's all these things in life that you encounter where you're like, wow, that feels so simple. It should have been blindingly obvious. Why didn't I come up with it until now? But here we are. It was helpful to me. Maybe it'll be helpful to you. And that's something that I want to try to generally employ when I feel like I'm getting creatively stuck, of like, okay, step back, just a short description of what I'm trying to accomplish. So that way I can, like, instead of having like general ideas of what I'm trying to do in my head, I'm extracting it from there and putting it into form. This is very similar to rubber ducking now that I think about it. Rubber ducking, by the way, is just a reference to talking to a rubber duck to explain your problems. It's similar to the idea of you're having a problem with something, and so you go up to somebody to explain the problem to them. In the process of explaining the problem to them, you figure out the solution. So you might as well have just been talking to a rubber duck because you didn't need their actual input. It's something that I've heard from programming, but it applies here as well. Any other major things come to mind? There's definitely stuff. So if I scan through here, oh yeah, I watched Desert Bus. That was good. Yeah. Okay. One of the really critical things also that happened this week. There's some good personal stuff too. So a couple of different. Wow, lighting slightly changed when I closed or minimized that window again. A couple of other things that come to mind. Daylight saving time ending sucked. I have some amount of, I don't know if it's quite seasonal affective disorder, but I get anxiety with night, and I've been processing some of why, and some of that's going to be in the next article that I'm going to be working on. But I processed some of why, and things getting darker earlier is not great for me. And then daylight saving time ending just abruptly accelerated that process, and whew, did not like that. Didn't like that at all. I will say that, however, with holiday lights going up, I mean, predominantly for Christmas, but certainly people can put up lights for whatever reason they want, and I certainly appreciate it because that helps a lot. A lot of it is feelings of loneliness, feelings of isolation. For those who have seen Doctor Who Series 5 of New Who, Matt Smith's first season series. I don't know why they call them series, but I'm not British, so or from the UK. I don't know what the proper term is. I know that there can be some sensitivities around some of those terms to refer to yourself from where you're from in the UK. I don't know them super well, so apologize if I get those messed up. I'm just looking out my window that's over there, thinking about this. But the end of that, not going to say a whole lot about it, but I get feelings related to that, or you can kind of get them a little bit from Outer Wilds too, I suppose. But it's just a sense of loneliness when I look out my window and it's just dark out there. It's just dark and quiet, and it feels very isolating, very alone, like all the world's kind of dead sort of thing. I really don't like it. And that's part of why I think I have a tendency to stay up at night, is because there's this low grade anxiety kind of sitting there that makes it hard for me to want to go to bed. It's definitely something I've observed some. But it gets worse at night. But the Christmas lights, the holiday lights, they do so much to help. So I'm very thankful that those are going up, and some in our neighborhood as well. And like having our Christmas tree all illuminating our living room as I step out into the hallway is really nice as well. And one of the other things is I ended up coming across through a newsletter videos by Dan McClellan, who is a Bible scholar. Don't know what his personal beliefs are 100%. Different videos lead me different ways. But that, like, I published my article on my views of the Bible, and then his videos hit me very hard. There's some stuff of what he says where I'm like, yep, that's 100% the place that I'm at too, just in terms of some of the understanding of it. But it felt like there was a fall to earth sort of moment. And I think this was probably ultimately good. But dealing with like, I have not really encountered critical scholarship of the Bible, and he's presenting a lot of that in a very like short form authoritative way, and that hit me really, really hard. So that had me like worldview shaking things. I slept terribly that night. I started watching it in the evening, which was not good timing, but so that was like 2 weeks ago on I'm recording this on a Wednesday. So like 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday, I was like not functional that day, as I was just kind of working through stuff. Was thankfully able to email a friend from church who I knew had interacted with a lot of this stuff more. He's able to give me some really good resources. Just part of it is when somebody's talking very confidently, I guess is the word that I'm going for, where they're projecting an air of authority, it can be very overpowering. and it's just a shock to the system. And one of those things where, like, I tend to be somebody who qualifies my language a lot. So if you read things that I've written or even hear me speak, I tend to use I think or I feel a lot, because this is very indicative of this is coming from my perspective. So I think tends to be, logicking out or whatever. Consciousness I feel is more subconscious, heart, emotion, and I subconsciously tend to be fairly good about differentiating those two, in terms of think versus feel on a subject or whatever. Like, I think I'd like Elden Ring a lot more if it wasn't such a pain in the rear end to get the regular smithing stone. For like, somber weapons are way too easy to upgrade relative to regular smithing weapons, and I think it's a problem of regular smithing weapons being too hard to upgrade, not somber weapons being too easy. I've done a whole video on that discussion. We're not going to repeat it here. So when somebody's coming through and stating things in a very matter of fact, is not quite the right way, but where they're not using a bunch of qualifying language, it's more succinct, and it feels like these were videos made for like TikTok or something. But it's more succinct because they use the vertical aspect ratio, and it's very forceful, and it really makes it feel like the person is coming off very confidently, like they're an expert who's being very confident about things. And the other thing that I knew is I just didn't know, and still mostly don't, but didn't know the broader discussion. Like, my educational levels is just, I'm not at a spot where I'm able to identify how accurate, like, what is he talking about in terms of the broader conversation. So the friend linked me some videos that are talking about some of the broader conversation, and that was very useful and very helpful for me. So I'm very appreciative of that. But that was also a pretty significant thing that happened this month. So it's also partially contributed to being a long month. Also, Lost Caverns of Ixalan pre-release happened. So I went to that. Overall had fun. Went 2-1. Cards felt a little different though. A little weird. We were commenting about it at the pre-release. Not really sure exactly what. A little flimsier or something. It's very hard to quantify exactly, though. I'm not. It's one of those, like, I can tell something is different, but it's hard for me to exactly quantify what. And you might see I still need to put cards away over there, so maybe I'll do some of that later today before the draft tomorrow. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap things up for this month. It has been a very busy month. It's felt very long to me. Like, when I think back to the first of the month, it's like, wow, that was a long time ago. And American Thanksgiving being like 3/4 of the way through the month instead of at the end of the month, because it's the fourth Thursday, also contributed to the month feeling long, because it's like there's a whole week after Thanksgiving. Really? Wow. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the stream VODs, some of the articles and other things that I will be linking to below. And thank you all very much for watching. Until next month, everyone. Take care and goodbye.